This is the 966, episode 75. Hello.
Yes.
Richard. How's it going?
75. It is. We're agreed on that. It's nice when there's so many. It's hard keeping track. So this is
Right.
75.
And I apologize to all the listeners and viewers for my voice, which appears to come and go these days, like a windstorm in the Saudi desert. We have a really good one this week, Richard, just you and me. How exciting. But we've got some really good topics to get to. Have had some really, really good guests recently on the program. Jacob Mom, Doa Al Salah. I suggest our listeners and viewers go back and watch or listen to those episodes. They've been just... Those guests were just so good. All of our guests are good, Richard, but we're on a roll here.
It is nice. And if we don't, we have guests. So we've been about this about 15 months. We've done 75 episodes, 50 guests, 50 plus guests. And we do weekly because, think about it. When we first started this, the Saudi U.S. Trade Group was founded in 2008, but we've been plowing this field for decades. You joined before that. Think about if we were trying to do something on Saudi Arabia every week, we wouldn't have things to talk about. Now, if we don't do something every week, an episode that talks about, for example, our one big things or our six yellahs, it just races on. And there's, scads more topics that, we have to get to or interesting or worthwhile getting to. I'm just saying that the rate of change and the rate of activity in the kingdom is just almost unfathomable 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, and just look at our newsletter, Richard. I mean, it keeps getting longer and longer, and it's not because we're being more or less selective. There's just so much going on, including topics we'll be getting to this week, Richard. Leap, which just concluded in Riyadh, a major tech sort of show that happened over 4 days there. We've got some really exciting topics in our Yallah program as well. The Yallah segment in our program, I should say. My voice sounds like I just returned from a very rowdy wedding. So again, I'm very sorry. Very behind on sleep this week.
I hope you went to a rowdy wedding. That'd be well worth it.
I have not been to one in a while. I'm overdue. It's almost wedding season though. And Richard, we will be taking a break next week from programming, maybe. So if we don't appear next week, popping up on your podcast app, then we will be back the following week. But I will be in Riyadh, and maybe we'll do one though, Richard. We'll talk about it, see how it works. But yeah, Richard, let's get going. Oh wait, before we do that, please subscribe to this wherever you're getting it or seeing it. It is cool. We've had a really big bump in subscriptions in the last couple of weeks, so that's very motivating for the 966 boys. So thank you for everybody who's joining us and for all the new faces. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the content.
It's fun. I mean, YouTube is just one of our platforms, but it's fun when that ticks over to 1K plus. So now we're in that indeterminate area where very few podcasts get to, where they just they just give the thousands figure. So again, thank you for everyone who's subscribing. It's extraordinary the growth we've seen in a very short period of time. Thank you.
Yeah, Richard, it's a determination thing. It's just like a last man standing. We just keep showing up every week. This is gonna really start to see good growth, and that's what we've seen. So again, one more thing though, comment section on YouTube. There's been some interesting ones this week, so please just make sure you're civil to each other on the comment section, which we love seeing all the comments there. So thank you to everybody for that. Richard, let's get going. What's your one big thing this week?
I think our one big things are in the same sort of general area. I sort of went down, as is my habit, sort of, pulled on a thread and kept following it. I happened to be in communication with Adam Szyminski, who's a friend of ours. He's senior advisor and former president of the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, CAPSAR, which he was also a guest for episode number 22. Awesome episode on renewable energy and energy transition and any number of other topics. CAPSARC is really a leading think tank and research center in Saudi Arabia. So anyway, what prompted my reaching out to Adam was that the 44th International Association for Energy Economics, the IAEE conference, has just been completed. So it was held in Riyadh from February 4 to 9. this month. And this is the 44th International. It's the very first one held in the MENA region, so Middle East, North Africa, and hosted, of course, in Riyadh. So I'm looking at it, and this is something that everyone, if you're paying attention, is aware of, either subliminally or specifically. The number of events that Saudi Arabia is hosting and convening nowadays is extraordinary. I happened to hear the Minister of Commerce, His Excellency Dr. Majid Al Kasbi, mention the other day that in 2022 they held 26 global events. So obviously, huge exhibits, forums, conferences, whatever, that had a global audience. And if you look at like scheduling for Saudi Arabia, I just checked, and for the month of February, 177 major events, exhibits, forums. This is a place where nobody went to 5-10 years ago, and now it's convening events at a extraordinary pace. And I just wanted to go through a couple of them, because this is just for February. So we have what I just mentioned, the IAEE conference. You have upcoming. We just completed the LEAP forum, which you're going to talk about. That's your one big thing. So I'll leave it to you.
Wait, don't ruin it. I'm just kidding.
Well, I couldn't ruin it. Huge event. Later this month is the Big Five, which is the largest construction conference in the region, 40 plus countries, 700 plus exhibitors. You're going to have people booing international, exhibits from 12 major countries, talking about the construction sector. Let me just read just a few that are going on this month in Riyadh. This is just examples. International Conference on Smart Computing and Application. Capital Markets, ESG Finance, Saudi Arabia. LEAP, IAEE that I just mentioned. The International Algae Conference and Exhibition. International Conference on Medical and Health Science, and so on. Riyadh International Humanitarian Forum. These are just this month, which is a short month, and they're in Riyadh, they're in Dammam, they're in Jeddah, and that's just sort of the conventions and convening. We just finished the Saudi tour cycling event in Al Ula. Just completed the Saudi International Golf Tournament over King Abdullah Economic City. Formula One is coming up in March. And these are not even including things, the annual Future Investment Forum, which I do every year, is huge shindig, global nature. Future Minerals Forum, they just did the second one of that, another big event, or their biannual defense show, which they just started up, just had the first one last year. So they'll do the next one in 2024. So I guess just an extraordinary amount of activity in Saudi Arabia. And I can connect this into some of the other things they're doing globally. I won't go any further with this. They're raising their profile tremendously. They're becoming a destination not only for tourists and historical sites and things that are of interest to people who want to come see Saudi Arabia, but also people who want to come do business in Saudi Arabia or convene in their specific sector and discipline in Saudi Arabia, things we haven't seen before, and at a pace we couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't have done it before because they didn't have the capacity in terms of visas to accommodate visitors for forums like this. So you would have to do so under a business visa, which, given the difficulty of acquiring that back in the day, would have really limited the number of people that could have gone to events like this. Yeah, I mean, and then this ties in very closely, Richard, with tourism. I mean, you're getting. I mean, one of those events that you mentioned was a massive tourism, the World Tourism Show. I mean, I think that was just in January or December. But I mean, these are global events. These are a lot of people that are attending them. Like those that attended 6,000 plus that attended the FII in October. For a lot of those people, that was their first time ever visiting Saudi Arabia. So you'll have a lot of these people coming into the country and seeing it for the first time, having their expectations completely shattered. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of events. You can actually go onto Google and type in events in Riyadh, and Google has sort of a kind of an algorithm to aggregate all the ongoing events in Riyadh, and they have really a lot of them that I've never even heard of. Really small niche
Like the
industry
algae,
trade shows.
International Algae
Well,
Exhibit.
that's a major
I'm sorry, I
big
don't.
event for algae enthusiasts and algae scientists. Actually, I bet that ties in very closely with energy. But
Good.
yeah, I mean, there are some very interesting ones. But if you do that in Google, you also see a lot of the purely social events, which would seem ridiculous a few years ago because there's just no
Yeah,
way to visit Saudi as a tourist. But you have Boulevard Riyadh and some of the sub events involved with that. So
yeah.
yeah, very, very interesting. Richard, that does tie in smoothly with my one big thing. It's almost as if we coordinated them. I swear we did not. The major annual tech event, Leap, just concluded in Riyadh. Leap is a 4-day long event in the kingdom that welcomes thousands of visitors, over 700 speakers, and 900 exhibitors, too, Richard. Then this
Yeah.
was a sort of a build out from last year. That Leap happened last year as well, but this year really had that sort of FII kind of gleam to it. Just on the subject of attendance for Leap, by the way, there was so much interest in the event that this year organizers, to their surprise, had to actually shut the doors to new attendees on Tuesday after the venue reached maximum capacity. That is insane. If you look online, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you see videos or photos from Leap. It's a massive
People
event.
storming the convention
Yeah,
center.
so for this thing to be oversubscribed, that is really saying something. Anecdotal reports saying that the event was so big, it was a roughly 3-mile walk just to see it all on foot, which would blow my daily steps completely out of the water. There were some big announcements, as these events usually have, and in sort of the fashion of Saudi events, big major Saudi events, they start with big announcements from some of the top speakers, and then it gets into sort of the trade show element. The event kicked off with some headline grabbing major announcements from Minister of Communications and Information Technology, Abdallah Al Shwaha, in a keynote, a name. If I messed up, I'm so sorry. Please send me an email and I will correct it. I'll practice it on my flight to Riyadh this week. The minister announced investments worth $9 billion to support future technologies, digital entrepreneurship, tech startups. Richard, I thought was really interesting, and we talked about this. A lot of that $9 billion was from US companies,
Mhm.
Oracle, Microsoft, Zoom. Um, we have Meta is going to build the first metaverse academy in the Middle East, North Africa region, which will be headquartered in Riyadh. There's really a lot to go into about this event. We don't need to go into all of it, but there was a lot of stuff that seemed very interesting. 2 contests, the rocket fuel competition and the Alibaba Cloud Hackathon, with big prize pools aimed at rewarding Saudi-based startups. Um, yeah, I mean the launch of the Saudi China Entrepreneur Association, which is, as Americans, is not something we want to hear, but is just shows that Saudi Arabia is moving ahead on the tech front in that respect. There was one article I want to mention, Richard, just to wrap this up. It was sort of weird to see this, but there was an Arab news article which sort of had a bit of a mixed blessing tint on the whole thing, being so oversubscribed. Cited some people who were disappointed with the event's master planning. Some interesting quotes in there. An experienced and planning development manager told Arab News that, quote, user journeys were not planned out correctly. Only the main pathway had ushers organizing all the human traffic. All the other pathways were disorganized and not clear. The distribution of booths did not allow for smooth transitions from one space to another, but rather created even more traffic. This made me think, Richard, of the huge events that we work together to organize here in the
Yeah,
United States, in
yeah,
Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles, huge business opportunities forums. And those were 12, 1,300 people,
yeah.
done in coordination with the U.S. Saudi Business Council and other stakeholders. And those took almost a whole year to plan out. Just every little detail you have to really think about when you're planning events like this. So for Leap, with thousands and thousands of visitors and sort of a combination exhibition and then also conference style format, a lot like FII. I mean, the logistics of that are so hard to pin down, especially for in Riyadh. So I mean, it seemed like it went off. I mean, maybe not without a hitch, but it was very well received, especially from seeing what I'm seeing online. A lot of excitement about what's happening in Saudi Arabia right now.
Well, and it's that's a good one, Lucian. And you're right. There's these things. The detail is endless, and it's a huge undertaking. I mean, just trying to the art, the visual, and the graphics involved, and all the digital displays. It's just mind bending, honestly. But your one big thing and my one big speaks to nobody's being forced to go to Saudi Arabia. They want to go there because there's business, there's scale, and there's opportunity, and there's spending. And that's the big thing. And you look at the leap. This is the second leap, and it has its growing pains. The numbers were enormous, oversubscribed. The granddaddy of all technology, events in the region have always been GTEX, the Gulf Information Technology Exhibition in Dubai. They had the 42nd edition in October, the 42nd edition. So it's a big deal. People go there. They want to be. This is the second one in Saudi Arabia. It's a big deal, and maybe even a bigger deal. Why? Just like I said, scale, opportunity, spending. It's got Saudi Arabia has a different gravity to it, and when they start doing these events, you can see why they're so oversubscribed. Another example is the air show, defense air show again in Abu Dhabi. It's always been sort of the granddaddy in the region. Last year, Saudi Arabia did its first World Defense Show. Huge. It'll be again huge next year. So you can see them sort of gathering into Saudi Arabia. We're spending. We have the economy. We have the scale. We have the opportunities, and they're just going to continue to be. Again, if we've talked about this before, Saudi Arabia is in a wonderful moment right now where everything's rolling forward. But you can see that once Saudi Arabia decided to make visas easy to get, to promote tourism, to make it just a much easier process to come and be in the country, and once they decided to really promote these sectors, again, be it technology, defense, future investment, minerals, whatever, people will come because there's opportunity there. And it's a great way to raise the country's profile. They're doing a good job. And it's a whole new ball game for Saudi Arabia to be a point. Not, I don't have to convince you to come to Saudi. We're going to put on the show, and we're going to be oversubscribed.
Mm-hmm. Just a really good point. I'm not going to add anything to that because that's all really good. And there's Leap. Talking about Leap, we could do a whole show on it. And so it was good to do like a one big thing combined with your one big thing about all the stuff going on in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure there'll be another big event next week. And then the week after that, and the week after that, and then eventually it'll be really hot. Yeah. The events will slow down a little
exactly.
bit.
Exactly. Well, Ramadan's coming up. And then Hajj. Well, some Ramadan, summer Hajj. So yeah, absolutely will slow down. You're exactly right.
Yeah, but it just, and they're packing it in, and it's 80 degrees in Riyadh today. So it's 40 here. So actually, it's pretty nice here. But I haven't been outside, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, Richard, let's go. So no guests this week. We will be back either with a partial episode or a full episode, or we actually don't have a plan yet. But we have so many great guests coming in the next coming weeks. So we're just going to jump right into Yallah.
Beauty. Nice and clean and quick.
Right now, yeah, we're going to just drive to the hoop. Yallah.
That's right.
Yallah. Saudi in a minute.
And Richard will kick us off as he always does, ably.
Number one.
By the way, I need a reader. I need like how you hire somebody to do a voice reading or like a reenactment. I need like somebody, or like in Little Mermaid where Ursula steals Ariel's voice. That's what I need right now. I need
if anybody didn't know, Lucian has some young kids.
Yes, I do.
That reference is in my brain, but it's been the far back of it, because it's been a while since I watched Little Mermaid.
I'm glad you know what I'm talking about, though.
Is it as good as ever?
It is. I did watch it last week. It's as good as ever. Yeah.
It's a classic. It's
a timeless classic. Yeah.
Number one, Hajj 2023, Saudi Arabia extends Nasoka program to more countries. Saudi Arabia has expanded, and I don't know if this is correct, so I'm guessing. Saudi Arabia has expanded its Nasoka program for Hajj pilgrims to more countries around the world. Nasoka is a unified government portal that helps pilgrims to apply and pay online for electronic visas, book flights, and pay for accommodation and transport. The move will benefit pilgrims from Europe, the US, Australia, and more than 58 countries, and will, quote, raise the quality of the services provided to enrich the religious and cultural experience while also achieving the objectives of the kingdom's Vision 2030 programs, unquote. said the Ministry of Hajj and Umrah, according to the Saudi press agency.
Yeah, I mean, it's already expanding. They launched this in 2022, so that's interesting. The ministry also announced plans for a free contactless card during the Hajj Expo in Jeddah, which will contain a pilgrim's personal information, including their address and health records, and will be linked to a smartphone and application. I just thought this whole article was pretty interesting. There's just so much development going on. This also fits into the leap thing of Saudi Arabia really putting technology first, and actually fits quite well into our conversation with Dr. Doa Al Salah last week, who is sort of, well, she spoke to sort of the forward thinking and the tech forward posture of Saudi Arabia when it comes to managing health for the masses.
Yeah.
So it just, yeah, I mean, this is really a cool one.
I like this. First of all, Nasoka offers more than 120 services, so it's sort of like Absher and other apps that they've introduced where you can do just a boatload of things on it. But I thought it really interesting that the Minister of Hajj, who we know and is quite capable, he mentioned that the objectives, it also achieving the objectives of the Kingdom's Vision 2030 programs, because this is a pilgrimage thing, but it has multiple wins. One is it's digitization, which they're trying to achieve. Two, it is providing better oversight and monitoring for these pilgrims. They can offer a better quality of experience, but at the same time, you bring in this central clearinghouse really of pilgrims. It's this is an asset to have all these people under one roof, because you can take the opportunity to grow additional tourism. You can promote and market. Hey, you're here for the Hajj or Umrah. Why don't you stay a little bit? You can cross market things. It's really in keeping with things that they want to do, which provide a better pilgrim experience, obviously, but also promote tourism, promote spending in the country, build the business. It's really I find it, I think it's a great idea. I hope it's implemented well, and I hope that the value for the pilgrim is improved, because maybe it's a little less local. Before they'd have travel agents who are deputized or authorized to do these things. Now it's brought under into one portal, so that those people are frozen out. But hopefully the service is better. But from Saudi Arabia's perspective of getting access to not only provide a better service but monetize in a greater way these visitors, it's a win-win.
Yeah. Agreed. Yallah number 2, the Big Five Saudi, which we'll be talking about, we just talked about a little bit, but the 11th edition of the Big Five Saudi, organized by DMG Events, a major event organizer in the region, will take place at the Riyadh Front Exhibition Center and Riyadh Front Exhibition and Conference Center, from February 18th, my birthday, to the 21st of February 2023. The largest construction event in Saudi Arabia will bring together 28,000 attendees and over 750 local and international exhibitors from 40 countries, showcasing the latest in construction innovations and technology. 12 country pavilions will shine the spotlight on construction solutions from Italy, Germany, Greece, Poland, Spain, Egypt, China, Kuwait, Turkey, Qatar, Austria, and India. I'm glad I got all 12 of those in there. I mean, Richard, just jumping into it. I mean, I think construction in the next 7 years in Saudi Arabia leading up to Vision 2030, massive.
Yeah. So again, Saudi real estate construction alone is expected to be 324 billion by the end of this year, 9% growth rate. There's a reason. That's why people are coming. This is what we talked about in our One Big Things. And, this is the 11th edition of the Big Five Saudi. It's gotten bigger every year. I'm guessing at the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth that you didn't have country pavilions. People coming from Italy, Germany, Greece, Poland, Spain, Egypt, China, Kuwait, Turkey, Qatar, Austria, and India, to show their wares and to promote their construction methods or what they have to offer. Again, because the market's really, especially compared to other down markets globally, it's really attractive. People are showing up.
It's just so cool. I know a couple of people that will be going and have already posted to LinkedIn that they're excited for it. I mean, it's just going to be a huge event. I bet there's some really cool pavilions. I
I
mean, it seems like
agree.
there's some cool stuff
I
there.
bet you see some cool exhibits. Number three, Saudi MBS, Saudi Mohammed bin Salman offers to build stadiums in Greece and Egypt if they join World Cup bid. Saudi Arabia has offered to pay for new football stadiums in Greece and Egypt in return for their alliance in jointly bidding to host the 2030 World Cup. The joint bid between the three friendly countries is in competition with a joint European bid by Spain, Portugal, and Ukraine, and a joint South American bid by Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Chile. The window for bids opened in June last year, and the decision on the tournament will be voted on by the 200-member FIFA Congress in 2024.
Yeah, this is a really sensational headline and story.
Yeah.
I think, Richard, there was also actually a Reuters article that came out just after we published the newsletter today about a tit for tat ongoing between Egypt and Saudi media. And, which is interesting because there's been such warm relations between Egypt and Saudi Arabia in the previous few years. As we discussed before on the program here, Richard, the bid, including Ukraine, is a bit problematic right now, of course, given everything going on there, the tragedy of the Russian invasion. South America's bid is interesting. Those countries will already have the infrastructure ready, just like the United States does for the 2026 World Cup. United States, Canada, and Mexico, I should say.
Yeah.
But the Saudis, I mean, as the headline says, they have money, and Qatar's success proves the World Cup in the Middle East is doable and maybe was one of the best World Cups ever. So, this is interesting. We know that there have been a lot of problems with the selection process for World Cup host countries in previous years, but this will be very interesting. So we'll know in 2024, which is next year.
Yeah. I think this was interesting when we included it. It was an article and it was broken by Politico. And last week, one of the Yellahs was the Visit Saudi becoming a major sponsor of the Women's World Cup, FIFA Women's World Cup, and the uproar about that. Of course, people are up in arms about this. I don't get it. There was obviously with the 2022 FIFA World Cup, accusations of corruption and buying and that sort of thing. Saudi Arabia in this case is going, all right, we're not bending, that we're not corrupting, we're not trying to buy this. We're coming up with an option and a bid that is along in the same vein as what Europeans are doing and South American countries are doing. And by the way, if we're in a position to help key partners, one an EU member, and obviously Egypt, a Middle East and African powerhouse, to strengthen our bid by building much of the infrastructure, well, heck yeah, we'll do that. And I thought it was interesting comment. And by the way, if you subscribe or receive the Saudi our Sustig review, one of the quoted topics, we lead everything with a quoted, and then four features, one feature, and then three other top storylines. But one of the quoted was, and I'll do it, and I'll quote: Saudi Arabia is strategically trying to position itself as an Afro-Eurasian hub, the center of a new world order. This positioning would enable Saudi Arabia to exert significant power and influence across a vast geographic area, which it is seeking to achieve by building relationships with key partners, unquote. That was Simon Chadwick, professor of sport and geopolitical economy at Schema Business School in Paris. So I guess my point is people are all offended. What is Saudi Arabia doing? I mean, it's it's outrageous. All right. Again, as we talked about last week, I don't think Saudi Arabia cares. Saudi Arabia has bigger plans. I think this is a fascinating observation, an Afro-Eurasian hub. Absolutely. Saudi Arabia sees itself as a middle power, an emerging power. It wants to be a nexus between Asia, Africa, and Europe. It's positioning itself to do just that. And if sport helps them to do it, why not?
I mean, Saudi Arabia is not some, nascent soccer. I mean, they beat Argentina as a national team. Al Hilal is now in the Club World
that's a Yallah
championship. Is it? Okay, cool. I haven't read ahead at all. um, so yeah. But I mean, this fits into many things like these events thing we were talking about earlier. This really fits into a larger strategy, a larger plan that you can kind of see coming together. And it's like the only suggestion I might have for Saudi Arabia is if they're going to be building these stadiums in Greece and Egypt, that they should make them like the stadium in Qatar that can be completely disassembled and taken down and moved
Right.
somewhere else. So they could
Right.
loan them the stadium and then put it on a barge and float it across the Mediterranean and then right into Neom and then get a little sports city set up there.
Well, one of the interesting things about this is Athens, I guess, is, and we also, this is one of the great things about showing up every week with this show and doing all the segments. We did a specific segment about the fact that Mohammed bin Salman visited Greece twice in 2022.
That was your one big thing. I think that was your one big thing of 2022. Like the
That
one
was
that I liked the most. I was like, that is so original.
Well, and they were talking about hydrogen, green hydrogen from Neom, using Greece as a hub for Europe. Great, but they were also having other conversations. Clearly, this is one of them.
Mhm.
And in Greece, they had Athens had the 2004 Olympics. They spent 9 billion euros and and built 30 venues. Most of them remain unused, and they would, a lot of Greek citizens were up in arms, after they've gone through some bankruptcy and some difficult times. Why are we spending money on that? So good Saudi Arabia saying, all right, you're not going to have to saddle yourself with that this time.
Yeah.
We'll cover this and we'll do it a little more creatively and with the ingenuity that you just suggested. But again, just like whether you like it or not, their sports outreach has many, many secondary and even many, not even secondary, but many other motivations, many other reasons to be doing it, many other knock-on positive effects, either back to society at home or geopolitically around the region.
Just look, Richard, at the Live Golf situation. It's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant here because when Live Golf was first announced, all you saw online, and I think a good barometer is generally to go into a comment section on Instagram and sort of, because they filter by most popular, you can kind of see, you can take a good pulse of what's going on. For the Live Golf situation, about a year ago at this time, all you saw was personal vitriol against individual players who were defecting and how they were taking the money and how it was ruining the sport. And now what you see is, commentators basically bashing Live Golf, saying we shouldn't let these players in, shouldn't let them play in the Masters, we shouldn't have them be allowed to play in the Ryder Cup. And everybody in the comment section is like, actually, I kind of want to see the best players in the world play each other. I kind of don't care anymore about this versus that. The situation is what it is. It's sort of similar to this. The other thing that just thought about this, Richard, you look at these three different groups bidding, right? They're basically consortia of
Same deal.
It's several countries trying to put their resources together and say, hey, let's do this. I mean, and the next one is in the US, Canada, and Mexico. It's three countries. Actually makes Qatar seem very impressive for, being the last country to host it purely on its own without, another country, essentially.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
Sorry, I just keep rapid firing points here. I can't even talk, so I don't know why I'm doing this, but really interesting, the economic figures that will come out. We've seen all the third quarter ones now for Saudi Arabia. We're going to get the fourth quarter ones, I think, starting next week or maybe the week after. And what's interesting about that is we're going to see they've already been impressively high, but I think we're going to see a big bump on top of that from all the World Cup economic
tourism numbers,
just juicing everything up. So long response there, but I think this is really interesting. We will stay on top of this on the 966. And Richard, we should try to get somebody in from the World Cup committee or somebody from Saudi Arabia if possible, because I feel like they'd be super interesting. Yellow number 4, foreign direct investment. Oh wait, so I should have read down even one sentence. It'd be a nice little transition. Foreign direct investment inflows into Saudi Arabia rose 10.7% in the third quarter of 2022 over the same period a year earlier. Figures from the investment ministry showed that FDI inflows totaled 7.2 billion riyals, $1.9 billion in the third quarter, according to the investment ministry's latest monthly bulletin published on Monday, versus 6.5 billion riyals in the third quarter of 2021.
Yeah, there was a sister when we did this, cover this for the Suster Review, we added up a related, and that was that there's a 54% jump in investment licenses in 2022, issued licenses, which is up, up 54% over 2021. And so again, this is everything that Saudi Arabia is after. They've got to move past government spending and priming that pump and have foreign investment and local investment come in. And we're seeing some nice trends and some encouraging trends. And then once again, it all goes to trying to refashion the investment environment and the regulatory environment so it is attractive to investment. So these are good metrics to see.
And hats off to the Ministry of Investment, MISA. We've had Deputy Minister Saad Al Shahrani, Dr. Saad Al Shahrani on the program. Those guys have such a broad mission. So it's cool to see them sort of deliver, because their mission is like just generally attract investment into the country. And one thing they're doing very well, Richard, as you know, is really monitoring it very well and kind of, I mean, these reports that are coming out, these monthly bulletins are fairly new, and they're excellent. They're really excellent.
They are.
So yeah,
they really are. And they do have a massive mandate and a broad mandate, and they're active. They're involved with everything, almost everything you see. Some sort of the Ministry of Investment has some hand in it or some facilitating role to play in it.
Yeah.
So it's nice that they're getting good news. And I agree with you. Those reports are excellent.
And I was in MISA's building, which is in Riyadh Digital City, in I think it was November, and just going in there felt like a tech startup. It just, everybody's walking around, it's packed. Everybody's kind of younger.
Good energy.
Good energy. Yeah, good vibes. So I mean, they're taking it seriously. So it's pretty good.
Love it.
Yeah.
Number 5, Al Hilal beat Flamengo to become first Saudi club to reach the Club World Cup final. Salim Al Dosari scored 2 penalties as Al Hilal beat Flamengo 3-2 to become the first Saudi Arabian club to reach the FIFA Club World Cup final. Al Hilal will go head-to-head against 5-time FIFA Club World Cup winner Real Madrid in the final this Saturday after the Spanish team's 4-1 drubbing of Egypt's Al Ahly.
This was a very lucrative win for members of Al Hilal, who received both 1 million riyals from Prince Al Walid bin Talal, who just stroked a check to each player saying, "I'm so happy." And then also the Minister of Sports wrote a check to each player for 500,000 riyal, which is 160 something thousand dollars. So, I mean, every player made about $400,000 plus with this win.
So what is that? 1 million riyals is 266,000. So 500,000 is half of that. 30. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
So almost a
400.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's awesome. It's also really cool that this is the second huge thing for Saudi soccer in the last couple months, with the win against Argentina being the first.
Yeah.
So, and then some would argue the acquisition of Cristiano Ronaldo being the local celeb there now. But I mean, just really cool.
If there were bars in Saudi Arabia, would Salim Al Dosari ever have to buy a beer?
No, that's a great point. He would
the game winner against Argentina in the World Cup. He scores 2 in the first trip to the semifinals in the club final. I mean, he's celebrated wherever he goes.
He's like Gronk in New England, he just shows up. That's amazing.
Like, the other thing, that's one thing. One, Salim Al Dosari should never have to buy Saudi champagne anywhere in the kingdom. The other is, it speaks to what we've talked about in the whole run up to FIFA and other things, is the depth of the Saudi soccer culture is not recent. It started back in the professional league started in the 70s. Al Hilal has been good for a long time. Al Nasser has been good for a long time. These have turned out some good soccer players. And it's really interesting that, to get to the World Cup club final is a huge achievement. And it doesn't just happen. You have to have a culture, and you have to have a track record of building talent and building teams. So again, it just speaks to things that we've talked about. There's depth in that Saudi culture. That's not just a recent fad. It's an ongoing passion.
Mm-hmm. Flamengo.
Yeah, Flamengo.
Pretty cool name for a team. Richard, number 6. Nice lean episode this week. I'm gonna go drink a bunch of lemon tea after this. I don't know what's happening.
Honey.
Saudi Arabia's honey tea. Saudi Arabia's gaming sector gets $488 million funding to boost talent and development. The kingdom's gaming industry received a boost with new funding worth $488 million as the kingdom pushes forward in positioning itself as a global leader in the industry. The financing is being provided by the Saudi Esports Federation, the National Development Fund, and the Social Development Bank. It targets both the gaming and esports sectors, and the gaming industry in Saudi Arabia, the Arab world's largest economy, is poised to grow 250% by 2030, with esports leading the growth. A recent study from YouGov found.
I am. This is interesting, and I like this because we talk about a couple things about on this show, and one is Saudi Arabia going where global industries are healthy and thriving. We talked about aviation, tourism, other areas. Interesting data point. The latest research from firm Newzoo shows that the global gaming market will grow by approximately 15% by 2025. This will be a jump from around 184 billion in 2022 to 211.2 billion in I'm sorry, in 2022 now. So it'll go from 184 now to 212 billion roughly in 2025, 15%. So it's a global industry that's growing. That's one point. So Saudi Arabia is investing in something, but this is the other one that I think is really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I'll throw this out. 966, Saudi-based game development company, says the MENA region boasts almost as many gamers as Europe, 377 million versus 386 million. The survey further says that the number of game startups in Saudi Arabia should almost double from 13 in 2021 to 24 in 2022, make it the fastest growing domestic market. So my point is, and maybe you agree, Saudi Arabia engaged in a 10-year lucrative contract with the World Wrestling, WWE. That was one of their first forays into global sports franchises. I really think that was motivated by the fact of their youth loved WWE. That it was a significant point of interest for the youth in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia sort of went out and said, well, if it's good for our youth, we're going to go out and support it. You can see some of that in the e-games too. Huge interest in Saudi Arabia, growing Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is looking to not only support that and reinforce it, but also to bring a whole industry, develop a whole industry. Saudi-based industry is what they're trying to do. So it's another win-win. It's culturally appropriate because the youth are really, really into it. It's also a good strategy commercially and economically because it's a growing sector of globally. So again, it's a twofer in my opinion. So it's really interesting how heavily they're going into this.
Yeah, and the PIF and some of their investment vehicles that they've owned have made a lot of investments into esports startups or esports equities. So what's interesting about esports, and they've had so many local tournaments as well, Richard, that we've talked about before, back to all the events they're having there. I mean, they've had a lot of, I don't know what the equivalent is of esports meetups, like hackathons, but for esports competitions, I guess. But what's interesting too is with the investments that are going to be made that were announced at Leap, a lot of them, majority of the money going in are major U.S. companies putting money into cloud servers and cloud storage, because Saudi Arabia is increasingly a digital culture, and that's the backbone of e-gaming and esports, is being able to provide servers and online networking for esports and e-games. This is interesting. That this is a lot of money to be putting into this and to be sort of reinforcing that industry.
And we don't even mention Savvy Games. I mean, they spent $1.5 billion in acquiring gaming firms. Again, much to the chagrin of many people across the globe. Oh my goodness, what's Saudi Arabia doing? It's buying itself into a major growing market that makes significant segments of its population happy. It's good policy.
By the way, Richard, this game developer support system 966. It's a little close to our name. We should should make sure we fend them off from any sort of hostile acquisition of the real 966, which is what we're doing here. But really interesting. Obviously, many people have commented saying that they love that name because it is the country code for Saudi Arabia. So
that's right.
When you do what Richard and I do, you hear it all the time. It's a natural name for this program, and this is a natural finish to episode 75 of the 966. Richard, let's try for next week. We can work on that. And yeah, a good one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.